You guys seem chipper. Well, let's get into it because we have a lot to cover, a lot of good stuff to cover. But first, let's pray. So, Father, this morning, we just want to say that we love you, and it's so great when we feel your presence and when you're near to us. Lord, today we just ask that you will open the scriptures to us. Will you allow us to see what you've written here for the purposes that you've written them for? And Father, will you most of all let us see you? Because we want to see you, we want to know you, we want to understand who you are and the things that you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Before we start, Kev, can you put up the first little slide? Dun, da, da, da. Here it comes. Oh, maybe the next one. We're going to talk about Eden, first of all. And this is probably not a bad quote. We all want to live in a perfect world, a world where we wake up without an alarm clock in the warm sun with a perfect mate. Yeah. A world where there's peace and tranquility, laughter and fun, where people appreciate you and don't mind telling you how wonderful you are. A world where every day is like the best day you've ever had. The days when everything went right, when we felt great and looked attractive, when we excelled and were triumphant at everything we set our hands to, but where we could do nothing and feel good about it. Where the smells were of food cooking, the sounds of the breeze in the leaves of the trees, the lapping of waves on the shore, and our best friends were over in deep conversation in the kitchen. The best warm bath and our favorite food that tasted exquisite. We all want to live in a perfect world. Don't we? Yeah. When things go wrong, does it feel right? No, it doesn't, does it? It feels like, oh, this is not right. It's not the way it's supposed to be. And there's something in us that it's not just that we long for things to be easy, but I think we sense that there's really something more. There's something that we're missing. So Eden, we're going to talk about Eden this morning. You can flip up the slide, Kevin. So just to give you a little quote here, beginning in partway through Genesis 2, there's been a shift, obviously, from chapter 1, where we had this grand overview of the creation, making of human beings, and now we're sort of down to it. And God talks about here how he plants a garden. So it says the Lord God had planted a garden in the east in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed, and the Lord God made all kinds of trees grow. So notice that God planted some stuff. Any English people here? Gardeners? Traditional gardeners? No gardeners? No English gardeners? Is that only for the old people? Yeah, the old people, the old English people. Yeah. What? It's quite good. Gardeners. Sarah's dad is a gardener, and actually, it's really great because he gets most of his revelation by going out in the garden. And I'm not a gardener. It's like, please, just leave me inside. But actually, the last time I was there, it was wonderful because I just really needed alone time with God, and I got to go out in their garden and just hang out in the sun. It was wonderful, so I appreciate gardens, as long as I don't have to do anything in them. So then it talks about a river watering the garden flowed from Eden, and from there it divided. It had 4 head streams. The name of the first is Pishon. The name of the second is Gihon. The name of the third is the Tigris, and the fourth river is the Euphrates. So what we're talking about here, if you picture this, is a garden. That's actually the term that's used, but not like a vegetable garden. That's not a garden. That's work. Okay, this is just like a park, more like a park, a ceremonial kind of garden, and it's well watered. It is cultivated, and we'll talk about location in a minute. But the term Eden sounds very much like the word for pleasure or delight. Okay, so already with the sound of the place, you just have this feeling like, sounds like a great place. And in fact, a lot of early translators plucked out a Persian loan word, which is paradise, which is like a royal park. Okay, so does that make sense? Well, it doesn't matter if it makes sense. That's what it is. And then if you go through some other places in Scripture where it talks about Eden, it's usually this sort of well-watered oasis with trees and springs and streams. And in some places it's seen as the opposite of like a desert, okay, or of ruined places. So it's really a place that you want to be. It's a place we would like to be. Okay? Wouldn't you like to be there? How many of you go to the park when you get a chance? Mountains, yeah. But even here, do you guys go to the park at all? Where? How about St. James Park? You have to ask the small group leaders. They'll know where all this stuff is. What's that? Yeah, you need a car. Or wings. Anybody wings? No. So it's great, isn't it? You go to a park. And what's the purpose of human beings to be there? Why are human beings there? Why did God put a human being there? Yeah, got to do some work. I guess that's okay. Okay, location. Where is it? Where is it going to be? Where does it say it is? Okay, it's in the east, presumably to the east of Israel. That would be my guess, is what he's meaning. And any other markers? What's that? 4 rivers. Do we know where the rivers are? Yeah, that's right. Euphrates and the Tigris they're pretty well known, aren't they? How about the others? No, we don't really know where they are. And even though he gives markers, so Pishon. Hey, that's the name, okay? Don't. Yeah, I'm just not going to say anything about that. It sort of means it sort of gives you the image of like a spring. It's a place that arises from springs, and it says that it goes all the way around Havilah. Although nobody really knows where Havilah is. And the other one is called the Gihon, which is like gusher, bubbler. So maybe something that comes down out of the hills or something. But it says that it has to do with Cush. And where's Cush? It's not next to Tush. It's not the thing you sit on, Cush. Traditionally, where is Cush? I know what you're thinking. I think you're thinking of Kashmir or something, aren't you? In that direction? Actually, traditionally, Cush is Africa, isn't it? Really? Yeah, really it is. The problem is it doesn't really fit very well, does it? So, probably, and it depends. You can go to the next slide, but oh, there we go. I took this myself, by the way. Last night, I just in the spirit. No, you can go to the one after that. It depends. It partly depends on how you translate this. Sometimes people think that it's at sort of the two sort of rivers there. That's the Tigris is on the right and Euphrates is on the left. At the top end, sometimes they view Eden maybe was there, but if you view it as instead of them all flowing into one spot and flowing out of it, you can reverse it, and it's probably down in the south end of Mesopotamia. That's sort of down at the bottom end of Iraq, Iran. Okay, it's kind of the traditional sort of location. There's a place in ancient Near Eastern mythology which is also kind of a place of immortality and wonder. It's called Dilmun. Dilmun. What does that remind you of? Dilmun. Oh, Dilbert. Okay. It's where Dilbert came from. Dilmun is like an island, or seemingly an island. That's what they talked about. So, nobody really knows, and it could be that that some of this is really giving you the impression of, well, we kind of have an idea where it was, but it's really inaccessible to human beings now, which of course the story goes on to tell us anyway. But generally, the idea is probably in Mesopotamia, the south part, and I would say this kind of makes sense in terms of chapter 4 and 5, because in chapter 4 and on, even in chapter 11, you kind of have the picture of the first beginnings of civilization. And the first cities are really, really in this area. So it's not a bad choice. What's in Eden? Trees? Flowers. Do you think they're flowers? I guess they're flowers. Animals? Yeah, there's animals for sure. What else? There's a couple specific things. Tree of life and tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay, so what is it that the tree of life produces? If you eat it, you get what? You get life. Yeah, that one's easy, isn't it? It's the other one that's tricky. Tree of knowledge of good and evil. What do you think that's about? What's that? Knowledge of good and evil. That makes sense, doesn't it? If I had vegetables, I'd give you one. But yeah, tree of knowledge of good and evil. So, of course, if you eat its fruit, you get what the tree is about, what the fruit's about. The question is, what is that? I'll just get Kevin, if you'll slip to the next slide. So there's some ideas. This is one of those naughty problems, in a way, everybody tries to figure out. And here's some ideas if you just go through chapter 2 and chapter 3, because there's all sorts of ideas. What does this mean? Well, here's some of the ideas. What it produces in a human being is death. So that's not so good, is it? And the second thing is that it opens the eyes, that's the idea, maybe, so that you're somehow like God. Weird. Also, if you notice later on, God says they've become like one of us, knowing good and evil. So that means that God himself is in this state. I'm not sure if I would say he's eaten from it, but he also knows good and evil, so it can't necessarily be bad, can it? So it's something that's not necessarily bad in itself. I would say from verse 3 to 6, and also from the language of knowledge, it has something to do with wisdom, perhaps. But then one of the results is that what happens when they eat it? Their eyes are opened, but what is it they feel? Shame. Okay, they feel shame. So those are some of the ideas you kind of have to use if you're going to wrestle around with this. This is the process that you go through if you're trying to do this on your own. Some of you will be like, there's no way I'm doing this. I'm just going to look it up on the internet. Some of you will be like, I don't believe the internet, so I'm just going to do my own work, which you get vegetables for that approach. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the question is are the consequences not really more about the rebellion of God rather than eating the fruit itself? That's a great question, actually. But probably the two things are really tied together. That's what I would guess. Yeah. Sure, that's right. Yeah, we gave dominion to Satan by the disobedience, and actually we continue to do that. That's true. Here's what I would say that it is. You can click to the next slide. Sorry, this is these are some options, actually. I'll just tell you the options, or you can read the options as to what this actually means. So this means having moral discernment. That probably doesn't work very well, given the consequences. And human beings would have had to have moral discernment anyway, right? They would have had to know good from evil to begin with. Otherwise, them eating from the tree is not going to be bad. They wouldn't have had the ability to do that. Sexual knowledge. Have you ever heard this? That it has, if you read a lot of literature, you'll realize that there's often this idea that there was something sexual that they were about. This is a story that's a little bit masked, but it's about sexual knowledge. But really, there's nothing in the context that would indicate that. Maybe it is that they're just grasping for, omniscience. They want to know everything. The term good and evil can mean everything from one end to the other. Sometimes when they put two words together like that, opposites, it means everything in between. But of course, they didn't really become omniscient, did they? Did they? No, they didn't really. So my reasoning is that it's really, it has to do with wisdom. And you can flick to the next slide. Omniscience means all-knowing. That's another word for that. Yeah. Okay. 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 Yeah. 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 Good thought. So the thought is, does this have to do with alchemy and that whole sort of way of trying to discern and divine secrets and magic and making things happen? And I think that, I don't know that it particularly is that, but it could very well. It definitely fits under the wisdom part, yeah. Because there's, in my mind at least, there's a bit of a suspicion that part of what's happening here is, it is a reaction, not a reaction, a writing of false ideas of what it means to, to be a human being and live in a world where there's the divine. And so, they had all sorts of weird and wacky practices according to the false gods. And so certainly a lot of the first 11 chapters is straightening out. No, this is the nature of reality. Remember I don't know if I said this yesterday, but I think I did. Instead of all the struggle with the, divine beings in the stars and the moon and the sun and the ocean, well, there's just none of that. It's just, no, the nature of reality is God. He made this stuff. So there's a definite straightening out of some false ideas. So that's true. It may fit into that. Stephen. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay, is the tree bad? Well, I don't think the tree itself is bad because, again, God has what this is. So in itself, it's not bad, but there's it's not something that human beings are allowed to take. It's not really good for them. Not only are they not allowed, it's just not good. And so I think this is, you'll hear all sorts of different things, but the whole idea of Eden is actually I think, is to give us a picture I mean, how do you describe life with God? We've had all sorts of images sent, given to us that we've picked up to think, well, what is this like? What is the perfect moment with God like? What is that going to be like? And for them, here was an appropriate picture, and it sort of resonates with us, doesn't it? Yeah, there's this beautiful place with water or the park. It's gorgeous. Man, you just go outside. You know, when I moved into my house, one of the ways that I knew this was God was that there was an apple tree. My son ate apples every single day of his life. It was an apple tree, so I'm looking at this house, can't believing, I'm going to move into this, and every part of it's really wonderful, and I go out the back, and there's this apple tree. And for the first several months that we were there until winter came, every day, I'd come home from work, just go out the back, wander around the big backyard, grab an apple off the tree, and eat it, and it was like, I've never eaten an apple so good as this. So imagine that. That's your world. And characteristically, God walks in it. That's the language in chapter 3 when it talks about God coming and asking, where are you? It's a custom. The language is customary. This is what he does. So Eden is really, in a way, it's a picture of humans meeting with God, with the presence of God. This morning you sang, I love your presence, right? By the way, probably the best song ever. But, we long for that. So I wouldn't say that this is heaven, but it's a picture of something like this, I would say, of being in the presence of God. It's goodness. It's good to be in the presence of God in a full way. There's everything there, including him. And what that does is it gives us a foundation block for what am I looking forward to now? Things aren't always good here now. We know why that is, but eventually, what am I looking forward to? I'm looking forward to something that's going to be something like this. It has at least those emotional, aesthetic connotations to it. I want to be with God because, man, it's such a great, Do you have a picture in your mind of what it's going to be like when you're with God? Okay, how many of you have some sort of picture? Some of you are a little bit like, I do, but I don't want you to say anything to me. What's your picture like? I have two pictures, actually. One picture is this one, and one picture is just sort of like Jesus way up there on a throne. It's probably not a really great picture, actually, but certainly not warm and fuzzy. What are your pictures? Come on. Who's going to be brave? No way. All right. Yes. Vegetables.
I don't need the vegetables. Okay. I think. I picture myself always on mountains and like streams coming off from it and clouds and stuff. Yeah.
That's really good. Who else? Come on, she broke the ice. There we go.
I see myself as a child, and I'm just sitting on his lap, and it's like really comforting. Yeah.
That's cool. That's great. Actually, I should say now that I think about it, I have a few more, but that's a really good one. What else? How else do you picture it? Being in the presence of God.
Eating good food.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
For me, it's not so much a picture, but a feeling, like that feeling of the presence of God when your heart almost breaks because it's so beautiful. I think it will be like that.
Yeah, cool. I like that idea of beauty. Yeah, so we all have a picture. Presumably, we all have a picture of what it's like being with God and being in the presence of God. And this is this is a picture, and this, in their day, this would be, probably everybody would say, this is the best. This has got to be what it's like. Because it's just full of goodness, full of provision, full of God's presence. So this is really a great picture, I think, of what it's like to be in his presence. And I'm kind of glad that it's at the beginning. Too bad we had to lose it. Anyway, I think there's a way, Kevin, you can recalibrate the screen over here. But basically what I've said is that eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is an attempt to pursue... It's gone. Okay, it's an attempt to pursue wisdom or experience or accomplishment outside of God or the boundaries that he's set. It's basically having independence, autonomy, living without God. And this is always the human struggle. In fact, it's all of our struggle, isn't it? Even for those of us who know God, how often do we do things and we just kind of leave him at the side? A lot. So it is our struggle, and I'm going to come back to this point probably later. But so pursuing wisdom is not necessarily something that's bad in any sense. But pursuing it without God is it's not what we're supposed to be doing, and of course it gets us in trouble, doesn't it? It's one of the major cruxes, I would say, of the quote modern and postmodern age, is that we have all of this power, and this would be one application. We have all of this power in which we've built upon things people before us, but we don't necessarily have the wisdom or the restraint to know when to do something and when not to do something. So it probably carries with it some dangers just in its own sake. Any of you guys see Jurassic Park? Okay, so that's actually one of the sub-themes of the movie. And if you listen carefully to some of the dialogue, it's very revealing. You know, where essentially what is being said is, you know, you think that because you can do it, in fact, Hammond says something like that. Well, we saw that we could do it, and so we just built this park. We just did it. And the criticism is, well, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And of course, in that case, he built a whole story about here are the consequences of doing something and not realizing you don't really have the power to the wisdom to follow through on it and to maintain what you've done. Now, obviously, it's just a story, and it's quite an amusing story, but it probably has a point. Yeah. No, not necessarily responsibility, because they had responsibility to do some things. They, were there to work the ground for one thing, but it's more the point of there's trust in God. I would say that's one of the things, but what are the boundaries that are set for us? What does God allow us to do and not allow us to do? And I don't, have you ever heard this line? You probably haven't, but if human beings were meant to fly, God would have given us wings. You've heard that phrase? It sounds great, doesn't it? But that's not really the point. The point is what does God say yes to, and what does he say no to, and what is the timing? Are we doing things with him or without him? Because we can do a lot of things without him. But that doesn't necessarily make it good. Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. What does responsibility mean if there's no penalty? Well, I think that's a good point. With responsibility, there's always a consequence. So if you don't clean your bathroom, wait, I'll give you the evil eye. If you don't clean your bathroom, you have a responsibility for that, right? And you don't clean it, what happens? It stays nice and fine. No way. You know, the school used to live in a hotel for there were 2.5 schools, and the boys' small group leaders didn't clean their bathtub, and so by the end, the bathtub was black, like somebody had painted it. It was absolutely disgusting. So if you it's just a natural consequence, isn't it? If you have responsibility but you don't exercise it, then there are always consequences, aren't there? You know, pretty soon somebody gets in the shower that hasn't been cleaned for 3 months and gets some sort of fungus, you know. Or, you know, you're at university, your girlfriend will never come over because, your room is just rank. No, let's go out again. You know, Lizzie. Could he have not put it there at all? Yes. Okay. Yeah. I think you've hit on something that's important. You know, well, why did God put it there if he knew people were going to eat it? Well, if you take it as more than just a tree that God put there, it's just a part of being human. Either we're puppets or we have choice. And we're given that we're built like we are, you can't love God if you're a puppet. You can only love God if you have a choice to love God and obey him and trust him. So with that choice comes the opportunity of, unfortunate consequences. So, see, the thing is, you have to remember that these stories are not just like a historical thing. They're what's called archetypical stories. They're meant to tell something about what life is like and what human beings are like and what God is like. And this story is our story. This story is totally our story. Anybody ever known there was something you shouldn't do but you did it? Yeah, just one person in here. No, everybody has done that. In fact, everybody's done it as a Christian even. We're at war, aren't we? Yeah, I know that, but I just really, it just looks really good. I really, really want that. And maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe God will be okay with it or forgive me or something. And, there we go. We suffer some consequences for it. We rationalize things. Well, maybe God didn't really say it quite like that. Maybe God's okay with it. So this is as much our story as anybody else's. There's, I think it's Becky Pippert, that was her pre-married name. I think it was her that tells this story about, there was something there was a guy who was working, or a son or something, on a farm, and there was something that was placed on the table, and the question was, he had for his dad or his boss or something, was, it wasn't a question, it was, stupid Adam and Eve. I mean, they were so dumb to do that. And so one day, whoever it was, puts on the table this little box or something. It's covered, you can't see what's inside of it. And then he says to this guy, you can stay here in this, you don't have to come out in the hot sun and work with us. You just be here in the nice cool and eat and drink anything you want and have a good time. But the only thing is you can't look, and please don't open that thing on the table. And of course, the first couple days were okay, but then, after a while that started to bug the guy. It's like, I wonder what's in there. And eventually, you know what happened? He opens it. I think there was a note inside saying, see, told you, get back to work, sort of thing. But that's us. We all have that choice. Sorry, you had a thought. I don't know.
So like love has to give us a choice. So that's why God put the tree there, to give us a choice, because he's not going to force us to love him.
Cool. Yeah. That is a great question. Have you never thought of that? What would happen if Adam and Eve had said sorry? That's a good question. We just don't know. And maybe they did. Although at first it doesn't look like it, does it? Let's talk a little bit more about this. But yeah, go ahead. Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, what was the verse again? 2:15. Sometimes.
Or in my Bible, and I've also heard like.
Oh yeah, to work it and to take care of it. That's probably the word shamar, so which can be to guard, or it probably has a number of nuances, which is why here at least they've translated as to take care of, as opposed to guard. Yeah, was the serpent supposed to be in there, and did human beings fail in the guarding of it? I don't know. It depends again the nuance and how you view that, and I don't really know. I've not read anything on that particular idea that they failed in that way. Before we just go into the fall, I want to talk for a moment about. No, I don't. Yes, I do. No, I don't. Yes. No. Oh, I don't have it here. Let's talk about human beings for a moment. Is that okay? If we talk about us again? If you notice in chapter 2, actually, do you have that, Kevin? I can just go from the slide. Yeah, it'll be the next series. So in chapter 2, you have a man, a human being, and there he is. And what does God say about the man and his situation? Yes, that's right. And what does he say about him being alone? It's not good. I thought everything was good. I thought God made everything good. Yeah, God did make everything good. We're playing it out. So he says it's not good for God to, or for man to. It's not good for God to be alone. It's not good for man to be alone. So why is that? What is he saying? It's pretty obvious, actually. Yeah, we need another one of these. One of them is not enough. We need another one. And we need one that's a bit different. Quite a bit different, actually. We need another one. There's something about... Have you ever heard this phrase, it's just me and God? I just need God. That's all that I need. You heard that kind of idea? Do you think this has anything to do with that? Think this says anything about that kind of statement? that it's not true. What's that? We are complete in him. That's true. That's true. There's going to be a tension in what I'm going to say anyway, but because we are complete in him. But there's also a sense in which God designed us to need other people. And in fact, part of the way that God meets our needs is not just sort of like the direct heaven download, you know. But it's also, God also comes through other people. It's interesting, Mark Verkler says on one of his email website items, he says, the question comes, why can't I get everything that I need via journaling, just me and God? And he says, because then we wouldn't need each other. And it's not just about male, female probably at this moment, but we're built in a way that we actually need each other. And that God actually uses other people to fulfill the needs that we have. So the whole idea, there are times when we're just going to have to, as Christians, we're going to have to go against the flow, and sometimes it feels like we're the only ones. And that is, just me and God. God is everything that I need. But in much of everyday life, God doesn't want us to be sort of like the Lone Ranger Christian. We need each other. And each other is the way that we stay on track. One of the ways that God approaches us with love. I think I was saying this the other day when I was in Brazil several years ago. We have friends there, and a number of people from that extended family have come to the school. And originally, one of the first two that came were, they were really, Kathy actually especially, really took them under wing, looked after them, made a way for them to come when actually the door had been shut, and all of those kinds of things. And they really consider us to be family, which is quite touching. But one day they asked us, "Would you come down to our store?" And so they just gave me, in fact, one of the jackets that I have, probably the one I was wearing today, and they were just like, "Do you like that one? Yeah, it's really great. It's really nice. It's really comfortable. Here, it's yours." And this is really, really surprised me, but I began to cry. Not like, I didn't do that in the store, okay? That's not what I do. But it was like, oh my word, where's this coming from? But what it was that they were just loving on me. And it was the love of God coming through them, and obviously them loving on me. It was a tangible way that it came to me. And so God, uses all of us in each other's lives. We don't just sort of trickle along on ourselves or by ourselves. Okay, how does the woman arrive on the scene? Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. God, need a woman. Poof. No, not that one. Different hair color. Poof. Yep, that one's good. No. Yeah. Yeah, that's a bad question. I wish you hadn't asked that one. Here's an elephant. Will that be a good mate for you? No, I don't think so. That's a bit big for me. Thanks. No. Why did he do that? Why do you think he did that? Why do you think God paraded all the animals in front of him? Nope, that one doesn't work. That one doesn't work. Maybe to give him revelation? Yeah. What's that? To appreciate his wife. Yeah, that's true. Oh, the donkey. No, thanks. Yeah, probably to give more emphasis to women. And so how does she arrive on the scene? Any men missing a rib? Yeah, so God puts, often in Scripture, the word is tardimel, I think it is, and it's this sleep. But often God gives revelation. Often God puts human beings into this kind of sleep. Dreams come sometimes in this sleep. And so he puts him to sleep, thankfully, because surgery without anesthetic is it's a bit painful, don't you think? Excuse me, could you take my gallbladder out? I'll just go in the office and lie on the table. You can just get it open. No. So he does that, and he fashions. There's this word for build, like you would maybe build a house or something. He builds the woman from this rib. Yeah. Okay, so the man is made from the dust. He's formed like a potter forms on the wheel, He forms the man. And she's made from a rib. Great question. Why do you think she's made from the rib? Okay, he accepts her because she's a part of him. That's a great English language use. A part of him. That's good. I know this is really cheesy, but have you ever heard it? There's a poem, she was formed from his rib, not from his head, so she wouldn't be too superior, and not from his feet, so she wouldn't be under him, but she was formed from his side, so she could be equal. You heard something like that? Yeah. I'm hearing, yeah. See, it's about poetry, and look what happens. You know what? It's kind of cheesy, but actually I think it's kind of right. She comes out of him. She's a part of him. And there's even in this, there's a sort of communication of togetherness. Yeah. Yeah. The reverse is true, isn't it? From this point on, men will be coming from women. With some help from a man as well. Peter. Ribs are close to the heart, maybe, yeah. Of course, they thought the heart was down here, so I don't know. He had plenty of ribs. He had lots to spare. Spare ribs. Okay. What's his response when he sees... Oh, by the way, it talks about how God brought her to the man. Exactly. Exactly right. You get vegetables for that. Okay? Yeah, that's his response. His response is like, oh, my word. This is the most delicious thing I've ever seen. Forget the donkey and the elephant. This is incredible. If a man ever says poetry, he's in love. And this is poetry. It's like poetry is always this kind of exalted speech, as Robert Alter says. It's like elevated, like, whoa, something special's going on, especially if there's just like a little clip of it, which is what you have. So when he sees her, it's love at first sight. He's stunned. He's overwhelmed. I have this friend, Gary, and he was in the school a long time ago, and single guy, wanted to be married, but wasn't going to just settle for any girl. And somebody set him up on a blind date, which often those go horribly wrong. I've been on those. Not since I've been married, but I've been on them otherwise. But anyway, so he goes on this blind date, and he comes home, and he's just shaking. He's like, Gord, she held my hand. And I'm like, wow, he's so excited about this girl. And the reality is, she is perfect for him. He is a hunting, camping, motorcycle kind of guy. And she is just like that. It's amazing. And she's totally godly. She was a leader in the church that she was a part of, a different kind of movement than we're part of. But, she was perfect for him. She was a little bit older. He was a bit older, so it was great. And I think part of this is actually important for us to realize, not that God brings to us the one for us. I'm not saying there's only one. That's a whole other topic that we won't get into. But there is this thing, and you see this later with Isaac and his wife, and Jacob, and more Isaac and his wife, that, you know what, you actually want one that God is bringing you. You don't just want to pick some random girl that you saw at the bar last night. Or guy, if you want to flip it around. Not that y'all are going to bars at night, but because that would be wrong. But you don't just want to pick somebody. You know, you have to make sure this is one that God is bringing to you. That you guys are all sold on that, right? Aren't you? What's the temptation though? Patience. Temptation is that we all want to be loved. And so the temptation is sometimes when it's just taking a long time or whatever, you want to make a false start, don't you? You know, you desire love so much that you'll just, and it's such a powerful force that you'll go ahead of where God is leading you. You'll pick somebody, he's a bit like, that's not good for you. Why aren't you listening? Hello! You're not listening to me! But anyway, the point is, he's blown away. What is it that's said in this poem? Come on. Somebody read it. You can say it.
Bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She will be called woman because she was taken out of man.
What comes next after the poem?
Oh. The man will leave his father and mother and be united with his wife.
Now, once upon a time, somebody quoted to this female friend of mine, yeah, you were supposed to leave and come where I live and do what I want, because it says that. Genesis chapter 2. Actually, it doesn't say that, does it? It says the man is supposed to leave. Actually, it's probably meant to be for both people. In the ancient world, the man probably didn't really leave his family. He kind of brought her in. But what part of what's being said is that what was the highest allegiance, which is your family, your parents, your uncles, your aunts, or whatever, is not the highest allegiance anymore. What the highest allegiance is your spouse. So that doesn't mean that you diss your parents and your siblings and your whatever, but ultimately when you make that decision, that person is the person that has the greatest, you have the greatest allegiance to them as opposed to your family. Obviously, we all have responsibilities to your family. That's not what's being said, but it is going a bit counterculture to what they practiced in the ancient Near East. And sometimes even today, depending on what your culture is, even in the West, sometimes, some of us don't want to leave our families. I don't mean move away, but that becomes the highest importance and greatest good, and it's not the way it's supposed to be. Except in my family, because I want my kids to be. Anyway, okay, good. Thanks. Oh, you might as well just cycle through the slides here, Kev. Oh yeah, here we go. It's not good. We said that. Next. Here it is. Oh, good. I'm so glad I saw this. By the way, it says here that she is a helper. And it says this twice. You guys have that? You know that, right? Okay, she's made to be a helper. And the word, it's a phrase, etzer kenegdo. She is the etzer kenegdo. So you can turn to the girl next to you and tell her, you're an etzer kenegdo. You'll hear all sorts of stuff about what this means. Okay, but the phrase is not used very often together. But etzer, if you look at etzer, it has to do with like giving aid, giving rescue, giving what's needed. And most of the time it's used concerning God. God being an etzer, or God giving aid, often in military contexts. So, you know the whole, G.I. Jane thing? No, forget that. Forget that. But my point is that this part of the term is not a weak term. And a lot of times the connotation with helper is, well, this is like the subordinate. This is the secondary helper who helps the really important and really strong one. For instance, one of my first jobs was I used to be the helper for on a pop truck. I worked for 7-Up for a couple summers, and then for Canada Dry, which, yeah. Anyway, and I was the helper. I didn't get to drive, first of all, and my job, and I didn't know as much as the driver, who was clearly my boss, and he told me what to do, and I did it. Okay, so I'm the helper. Using that language, I'm clearly subordinate, not as important, etc. And that's not at all what this word is about. Okay, it's a very strong word with nothing in it that has to do with subordination or weakness or anything else. The other word, kenegdo, when it's in the construction that it's used at, has to do with sort of something that is in front of or around or whatever. I would use the term counterpart. Counterpart? Kenegdo? Go back to that, will you, Kevin? Dun, 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 dun. There we go. Okay, etzer kenegdo. So unfortunately, and you have to understand, I'm not a feminist. Okay, that's not my agenda. I just want to try and bring some balance to this. Often in Christian circles in the past, depending on where you are, it's very much actually followed more of a cultural model, which is women should be submissive and shut up and be barefoot and pregnant and do what I say. And biblically, that's not correct. Now, you can be barefoot and pregnant. That's all right. Just obviously not here. But where is my brain? But it's much more of a, this is a person who brings something to me, and together we do things. They are a part of me. And everything in the text indicates that, coming out of the side, etc. There's this connotation of togetherness of men and women. Obviously, we're talking about being married here. And again, women are made in the image of God just like men are. So any time that you're going to hear something, and I'm not talking about differentiation of roles, that's different, but any time that you hear something that is going to communicate to you something that women are lesser or not as valuable or whatever, that's just not the way that the biblical text goes. Okay? Everybody clear? Excellent. Click. And click again. I love that part, by the way. Wow. Man, he sees her and just like, yeah, she's it. Okay, if you'll go to the next one, we'll discuss a bit more of this before break. You guys all right? Yeah, it's a little bit longer than normal, isn't it, when we start at 1:45. So we've been going for about an hour. We'll go a little bit more. We'll go quickly through this. Not this one, but fall from innocence. Okay. By the way, in the beginning of chapter 3 begins with this phrase, now the serpent was more shrewd or more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord had created. Did I quote that right? Okay, good. That is really unusual So automatically, when you read that, you'd be like, beware, watch out. Okay? You just close that one down, Kev. Because you want to go to, I think it's Fall from Innocence, is what it's called. So that's the first thing. How are we going to identify the serpent? I mean, after all, here it is, a talking serpent. Is that normal for us? Anybody ever seen a talking serpent? Yeah, all the time. What drugs are you taking? Yeah, we don't. So we have to kind of figure out what is this, and of course, what are the options here? What are the options? What do you think? I don't want to say. Run away. What did you say? Did you have an idea? Tell me. Tell me right now.
Options for
What is a serpent? Snake. Dinosaur is usually, I suppose it's possible, but it's not usually an option here. Yeah. Anything else? Lizard. Dragon. Lizzie? I don't think so. No way. No. She's one of the ones that you say, oh, wow. Okay? How about Satan? That's how it's identified later in the New Testament sometimes, referring sort of back to this, perhaps. Snake with legs, sure. Maybe it's a talking animal in a time when animals talked, like in Narnia. Do I think they really talked? Oh, don't ask me that question. Yeah, go ahead. If everything's good, why was Satan there? Okay. Wow, great question. Why was Satan there if everything was good? Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. But I wonder if it's a question. Remember, I said yesterday, we ask a lot of questions that it's good to ask questions. You need to ask questions because it helps us sometimes. But sometimes they're just extraneous questions for what the point of what they're trying to do. This is one of the things that happens. My son is famous for this. If you sit down and watch a movie with him, he'll. It's an event. If you watch a movie with my son, it's an event. It's not like you ever get to sit there in silence, okay? Because there's just hooting, hollering, laughing, slapping the couch and scaring you to death, and there are like 50 billion questions. So you'll be seeing a man and a woman walk into the bank to rob the bank, and he'll be asking, "Where did she get the purse?" Like, I don't know. It doesn't matter. No, where did she get the purse? I don't know where she got the purse. She could have gotten it anywhere. And what I always have to tell him is, it's not important to the storyline. It's not what the storyline is trying to tell us. And sometimes that's what we do, really, especially because we come from so long away. We are importing our concerns back into them, and it's great. And please ask as many questions as you want. But my answer is probably, it's just one of those things we're probably not really supposed to worry about, because it's not really, if we, like for my son, if you've spent all this time on where did the purse come from and what kind of shoes does he have, you pull out all these things on the side, and you actually miss the direction of the story and the message that's being taken. So that's one of our challenges is with our questions, is ask the questions, but then we have to come back to whatever that is. So great question, and I don't know the answer. I covered myself, didn't I? Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, hold on. Let me just for the cameras here. But so from the idea that each we talked about this the other day about how each letter has something that has a connotation to it. When you put it together, it builds something. And so from that idea that the word for good has to do with building and uniting, and evil having to do with scattering. Okay, and dividing and scattering. Okay, go ahead. Okay. Okay. Sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So just to continue on with that, there perhaps is there something in God that is not only about uniting but scattering, and given our choices, we pervert that good impulse of God for scattering for good, I suppose, but we pervert it, or Satan perverts it. Yeah. 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 And again, I'm not really sure about the base concept, but I think it's true in the sense that one of the things that Satan usually does is he takes what's our strength, or something that God has placed in us or in our situation, and he twists it around to make us abuse it or go in the wrong way or something like that. Yeah. Carmen, you had something to say a little bit ago, and I passed by. Do you remember what it was? Okay. Okay. Yeah. What's going to stop us from falling? Just like Satan fell. Yeah. Right. Okay. So I have two responses to that. If Satan fell when he was in heaven, what's going to stop us from falling in heaven, even though we've been redeemed? For the first part of that, that's a great question. I think part of living in this life is that we choose not only we choose who we love and who we're going to trust, and that we begin the journey of walking in that way, and having made that choice and beginning the journey, although we don't always arrive. Well, we don't really arrive there totally by the time we die. We are fast forwarded then in the direction that we're going, and of course the opposite is true. I think one of the things, I think, this would be my opinion, because we have further knowledge of things, I think our importing back in the idea that this is Satan probably makes it more difficult for us. If you just think of the serpent as kind of an anti-God symbol, and remember that serpents were associated with wisdom and immortality in the ancient Near East, but also remember I talked about the chaos monster, the Tiamat and Leviathan, etc. There's kind of already a negative connotation being here, and maybe we don't try and bring back in that label right now about Satan and just see it for what it is. Although, again, we just have so many questions about it, I think. Last question, then we'll move on for a bit. Okay. Yeah.
I don't think there's any temptation in heaven.
Right, yeah. Well, it certainly seems like that, doesn't it? Because everything that we want is there. It's God. So we've probably proven ourselves anyway by the time we get there. Sorry, I got to just... We'll talk later. Okay, so, obviously a talking serpent is something out of our experience, and there's lots of options for this. It doesn't really feel like a fable, which is where you often have talking serpents. Conditions are different, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, we have to go with this. The serpent, first of all, you can go to the next slide after this. The serpent first unhooks her, doesn't he? He unhooks her from her safe trust in God. He gives this question, well, really? Did God really say that? And then he calls into question these things. So he calls into question the command of God about you shouldn't do this. Basically the knowledge of God and the character or the love of God. So he sort of unhooks her, and him, by the way, because he's got to be hanging around. And in a way, this is kind of what God does. What Satan does. He's sort of, did God really say that? Did God really mean that? Is God really that good? And then he puts the thing in front of us, or he puts the image of the thing in front of us. You could have this. Sort of like a game show. You could have this brand new Ferrari. And you think, oh, I don't really need a Ferrari. And then you look at it for a while and you're like, wow, I really love that. And I remember how they used that on Miami Vice. I really wanted to be like him, yeah. And man, it really goes fast. I wonder what that acceleration is like. Oh yeah, look at those Pirelli tires. Oh, some of you were like, that's not a temptation at all. Not for me either, but that's kind of what he does, isn't it? He gets you to really look at something and imagine what will this be like? If you had this, if you did this, whoa, you'll be the man. You will be the coolest girl ever. Isn't that what he does? All of you are looking away like, no, I'm not saying anything. I'm exercising my Fifth Amendment right because it might incriminate me. It's what he does. Yeah. Next slide. The heart of the temptation. Oh yeah. Interesting that earlier on it talks about the tree being good for fruit, good for food, etc. And then it comes back again. By the way, I don't really have time to talk about this, but these chapters, all through chapters, well, actually the whole book, but especially 1 to 11, they are so intricately written. And they have all sorts of little puns. Like the word for shrewd, for the serpent, it's not really the normal word that you would use. It is a word, but it's not the normal word. But the verse before talks about how they were naked and had no shame. Well, the word for naked and the word for shrewd they really, really sound the same, and they're spelt almost the same. So as one commentator said, they wanted to be shrewd, but they found themselves nude. Did you get that? Yeah, okay, yeah. Some of you like things like that. Others of you are, never mind. So there's all sorts of these little complexities and word plays and numbers that are repeated and patterns in Scripture. You can go to the next slide because I think I have one of these patterns. Oh, yeah. You can go on past this one as well. That's one of the important things, that she wants to be like God. See, no, Satan says, you'll be like God. Thing is, she's already like God. But she wants more. Oh yeah, these are the results of sin. You guys kind of know this from your work with earlier in the semester, but some things that happen: shame, fear, obviously broken relationship with God and with each other. You see that, don't you? When God comes, they're hiding. And then he says, what is this you've done? Is the question. And the man says, it's her fault. Oh, and it's your fault because you gave her to me. It's not my fault. This is classic, isn't it? When you get caught. No, it's not my fault. I didn't do it. I was forced to do it. When you have children, you're going to see yourself. Believe me. Because that's what we do. We all do it. Yeah, I have an excuse. It's not really me. It was them. Johnny led me astray. And what does she do? She does the same thing. It was the serpent. He made me. The devil made me do it. The serpent, of course, is not talking at this point, so he's stopped talking. And so these are some of the things that happen. You have a broken relationship. You ever notice that when you do something that isn't really good with God, you don't tend to get along with your friends either so much? Your parents, you're irritated. Your kids, for those of you who have kids. It's most of you. Okay, there's increased pain in childbirth. There's several ways of interpreting that. There's increased pain in childbirth. So that doesn't mean that she didn't have pain before when she had kids. Yeah, she did. But it means that it's been ramped up. It's going to be tough. It's a lot harder to work the ground now than it was. It's one of the results. Ground is just tough. Which doesn't mean so much for us because most of us are not gardeners or farmers or whatever, but it's just a symbol of how things go in this world. Obviously, mortality, they're not going to get to live forever. And then they get also exiled from paradise. So it's not that God never shows up, but there's something about this wonderful, beautiful, I meet God face-to-faceness that they no longer have. And we all recognize a separation, don't we? There's very few, how does God come to us? Dreams, vision. God comes to us in his sort of presence, in light. There's all sorts of ways, but there's not that face-to-faceness. Like, generally, I'm right here, I can touch you, and I'm going to see you every day in that way. There's now a separation. Next slide. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. Why is mortality grace? Certainly in the language, there's all sorts of ideas about this, but the language is, it doesn't tell you why, but it does say it's actually not good for us in the state that we're in, having eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, to now reach out and grab immortality. It doesn't tell you why, but it's pretty clear that there's an imperative here. We can't let them do this. It's just not going to be good for them. So probably it does have something to do with God's grace. Although it's not really explicit. It's a good point. Yeah. Enmity, sorry, that's one of those. It just means hatred, or hatred, or not dislocation, but relationship's broken. It's not really so good. Enmity is more like is hatred really. So there's that phrase. Okay, again, I don't want you to see this as just an ancient story and what's the deal. This is our story. All of us have choice, and God has boundaries. What is our choice in all of this? Are we going to do what's good? Are we going to trust Him? Are we going to live at peace under His rule? Or are we going to make those choices over and over again, which cause difficulty? And, obviously, none of us is going to say, yeah, we'll just keep making those choices. We don't want to do that. We want what's good. By the way, who gets cursed? Technically, the snake in the ground. The woman and the man are not technically cursed. The ground is cursed because of what he's done, and that makes it more difficult, but they themselves are not cursed. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah. So the question has to do with, in the beginning of chapter 2, it talks about how the world was, at this point, was basically unformed in a lot of ways. Water coming up from the ground, there hadn't been any rain, and God then planted a garden which He put human beings in. And so what does that mean exactly? I think the way you're supposed to see this is that as human beings are now expelled, in a sense, escorted off the premises, I guess the world has certainly moved on in its development, but now the possibility of just entering back into that presence of God on our own will is just not there. And it's almost as if you have this earthly place, and now it's been pulled out. Now we just don't know where it is. We can't find it. We can't find our way back. Say that again? Yeah. Great point. Were the animals expelled also from Eden? Again, it's probably one of those questions that we can wrangle around. It doesn't really tell us. Clearly there are animals in the earth, so were they expelled or were they also in the rest of the earth at this point? It really doesn't tell us. Do you have any final questions on this, Sean?
You said only You said only Satan and the ground were cursed. Do you not think that there are any connotations in the fact that man was made from the dirt kind of thing?
Absolutely right. It's a pun. It's a play at the very least. Yeah, there are connotations. He's taken from the earth. He's made, and you know what? You're going to go back there. But yeah, there's artistry, if nothing else, but certainly a return. Yeah, it's good. Good point. Stephen. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, no evil in God, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think that was really what she was saying, just about the separation having to do with God. It was more, I think, what she was saying was sometimes we take what is good. There's sometimes something in God that has to do with sending us out, let's say, and twisting it. Last thought. Remember I talked to you about the big questions? Well, this is an answer to the one of the big questions. What's wrong? What's wrong? And people have all sorts of answers for what's wrong. What's wrong is power structures are not right. What's wrong is there's not enough education in the world. What's wrong is da-da-da-da. Here what's being said is what's wrong? What is wrong? What's wrong with the world? It's broken. It has a 3-letter word. Sin. So that's an answer to one of the big questions. What is wrong? We can and we should work on things like education, fixing power structures, etc. But at the bottom line, what's wrong is sin. And sin arises, at least in its first instance, out of our choices. Now, obviously, there's more to it than that, but that's a sort of primary response. What is sin, by the way? Disobedience, pretty basic kind of definition, isn't it? Disobedience. And maybe you could say also after this, maybe trying to be like God. Maybe crossing those kinds of boundaries. Oh yeah, a couple more things I just want you to see quickly. I did say that was the last thing, but I lied, okay? The seed, I'll put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and hers. He'll crush your head and you'll strike his heel. There's some debate about this, but seed, what are we talking about? Yeah, you guys cheat. Jesus. But in the first instance, in this book, we're not talking about Jesus. So what he's saying is that there's going to be this ongoing struggle between human beings and whatever the serpent and his or anti-God symbol, whatever. There's going to be this ongoing struggle. Who's going to win the struggle, by the way? Him, his seed, or the human being's seed? Human being's seed. And you can tell that partly because the curse is on him rather than us in this sense. And also because of our relative positions. In other words, the serpent is down there and we're up here. So it's a little easier for us to crush his head. Okay, so, but the thing is that now we need to be looking in this story. If you were reading a story, a regular story, you would be looking for, okay, this is the escape hatch. You know what a story's like? Most stories are like this. Over here. Come on. We're in the Shire. Everything's wonderful. There's beer, there's parties, there's fireworks. Okay, everything's good in a regular story, right? Now in our day, we kind of mix things up. But a regular story starts from this position of everything's really good. Everything's wonderful. And then, dun, 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 something happens bad. And now, for the rest of the story, we're trying to get ourselves back to this, aren't we? Isn't that the way a story works? We're trying to get back there. And finally, there's a solution. And think of the book of Job. Job is the most righteous man on the face of the earth. He's got a perfect number of kids, and he's righteous, and boom. And now he's in the doghouse. And in the end, boom, God makes it good again. Or even better. That's the way a story goes. So, in the story, things go bad, but God promises this. There's going to be this thing, but your seed is going to win. So, in the rest of Genesis, you're kind of looking, how is what's wrong going to get fixed? And what you're going to see, probably the first person you're going to look at is going to be Noah. And the next person is going to be what? Abraham. And who's going to be after that? Gordon, that's right. And who's after Jacob? The only problem is that the story keeps going. We haven't quite got to this point yet. And we know this point is Jesus, don't we? Which is why the New Testament writers are at pains to say sometimes from the seed of Abraham. I think Luke goes all the way back to Adam. This is the fix of the world. And we make it. But through the rest of the story, we're going to be doing this. We're going to be looking for when's the solution going to come? When is the seed of the woman going to show up and fix this thing? Cool. All right, guys, let's take a break.